General art, we finished perspective. Now our next project is to get into shapes and shadows, and so we're going to do a grayscale because we're going to be using every variation of graphite that we can. So this is what the project will look like. How we lay it out is we take our T-square, we just put it down the middle of our paper. Our paper is 9 by 12, and we draw on both sides of the T-square, and then we take the ruler that's on the T-square, or a different one, doesn't matter, and we come down 1 inch, and we make a mark. Then we make marks at every inch coming down, and then we'll just take a T-square. If you actually have this mounted on your drawing board, then you can just slide everything along with the T-square. But you just come along and you make marks at every inch. And what you'll have is 10 small little rectangles. Okay? Every so often somebody puts an extra rectangle on each end, so you have 12. That just makes it more work for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our 6B pen, or pencil, 6B pencil, okay? And it's the softest and the darkest that we have. And so I'm going to come to one end. I'm just going to start to cover that entire space with graphite. And I want this to be just as dark as I can get it. So I'll end up going both ways. Just keep going over it until all the little white specks are gone. Now your lightest graphite is your 4H pencil, and it's also very, very hard as far as the graphite. And so whereas this one's soft and it smudges and everything, it does not. So my 4H pencil is what I want to use down at this end, and I'm going to try to make this just as light as I possibly can. So I want it to be basically white with just a trace of gray in it. Now at this point, this is way too light, because if I go that light, I'm going to run out of spaces as I go down to go gray. So I want to darken this just a little bit. But just make sure that there's a variation between the two. So it's never going to be quite as dark as the one above it. And as I work, I can always come back and darken this in if I decide that's what it needs. Okay. Now I'm going to go to this one here while I'm working at this end and fill it in, but I have to make sure that it's lighter than the one above it. So now I've colored in most of the squares. I have one left, one rectangle left. As I've done it, I started off with a 6B pencil, and so this was a 6B. At this point I changed to an HB. This was an HB here. This was a 4H. This was a 4H. Okay. Now sometimes you'll get going and you'll decide, oh, something needs to be lightened up. And if you took your eraser, like your white eraser that came with your kit, you start trying to erase and it makes a big mess. And so what we have is the one that's wrapped up in cellophane. It's called a kneaded eraser or a kneadable eraser. And what that means is that you knead it. You pull it out, you stretch it, and that cleans it. And so it's kind of a really sticky thing. But I can come along here. Now, if I want to lighten something like this, I push against it. And it takes that graphite and pulls it into the eraser. Now, that part's now kind of dirty. I mean, it won't do that very much after this. So what I do is I stretch it and fold it back in on itself. And what that does is it thins out all that graphite and puts it throughout the eraser. And so now I have a new clean spot that I can work with. Okay? So as I'm working on this might be just a little bit dark. We'll see. So I'm going to come in here with my HB pencil. I've got to come up with a tone that is in between these two. And so I'm going to start. Now, one of the things I have to be very careful of is, especially the 6B pencil lead, very, very soft, very dark, smudges like crazy. So if I get my hand in it while I'm working, boy, it's going to be all over the place, all over the paper, all over my hand. And so it's a good idea to just be aware of that and try to keep your hands out of the graphite. And I can put my hand down and then rest my other hand on it. And that kind of gives me a little bit of separation between the graphite. Now as I look at that, these two, there is a variation, but it's getting pretty obscure. And so I think I'll take my kneadable eraser and try to soften this just a little bit. And I just dab at it. And so now it's still darker than this one, but I think I'll be able to keep it lighter than this one here. And this is referred to as a value scale. Sometimes it's also referred to as a grayscale. In photography, they actually have these printed up on pieces of paper, so you can hold it next to something that you're working on, and you can see the variation of the grays. But this is important to learn so that you have contrast when you're starting to shade your objects in either a still life or your basic shapes. So often I get pieces in and all they've done is shade in this lower light area here. They haven't had any darks, and so there's very little contrast. And contrast is one of the things that makes your compositions interesting. Okay. So this was also an HB pencil here. So that's my value scale.